Hey guys, Nikki and Greg from Gentech Performance. Just wanted to give you another video on the 74 Roadrunner that we're building.
For those of you not familiar with this build, it came in with a 318 with a lumpy cam and a 4-speed transmission. The car had nice style being plumb crazy, but the owner desired more power and a modern feel. We thought it was the perfect platform for a Mopar Hellcat engine and a Tremec T56 Magnum transmission. Check out the other videos in this series to get up to speed with this project.
We started off with a basic 17-gallon RCI aluminum fuel cell. We opted to use a drop-in, in-tank style 525 liter per hour fuel pump from Holley. The fuel cell originally had no baffles, and we wanted to create a sump where the fuel pump goes to eliminate fuel starvation. So this video will take you through the fabrication process to get this fuel cell to work for our application.
We needed more space in between the fuel line fittings and the top of the fuel cell. So I decided to weld a 1/4-inch spacer ring for the fuel pump to sit on, which created a gap between the fittings and the top of the fuel cell. I started out making a 3¼ inch hole for the fuel pump hat, then cut a 6-inch circle using my circular saw with a wood blade on it. I know there's other ways to cut aluminum like jigsaws and bandsaws, but this works well for me and it works quick. Once the cutting is done, I use a flap wheel on my 4.5-inch grinder to deburr the edges and get the ring ready to weld onto the fuel cell. I tack the ring onto the fuel cell, putting tacks quarterly, and then I begin by welding at 12 o'clock and going all the way around in the same direction. The welder I'm using is an old Miller Aerowave. It was actually designed by Boeing and then later replaced by the Synchrowave. It actually works pretty well for how old it is, but it doesn't have any pulse settings or anything fancy like some of the newer Dynasties would have. The welding hood I'm using is an ESAB Sentinel A60. It's probably one of the nicest welding hoods I've ever used. It has a grind mode function, so I can toggle between welding and grinding and use the helmet as a full face shield. I'm using a pure green tungsten with the machine set on AC, and I like to keep my amperage pretty high for this because I'm welding on aluminum. I'll usually set the machine to say 350, 400 amps and then just use my pedal. Having the amp set extra high lets you start a little bit quicker because in the beginning of an aluminum weld, you're just hanging out waiting for the puddle to form because the metal sucks all the heat out. So starting with a high amperage, you get to create your puddle faster and then move on a lot quicker and then just reduce your pedal amperage. If there's anything I can say to anybody wanting to learn how to weld at home, is get comfortable feeding the TIG wire with your hand in a steady, consistent motion rather than dabbing your whole wrist. I like to use a blowgun on an air hose just to cool the metal down in between welds. Even if I'm doing sheet metal on body repairs, I always like to go a few inches at a time and then cool it down. I'm also just using a DA sander with 80 grit sandpaper on it just to get rid of any arc marks or scratches, or I don't like hitting anything with a grinder because it will show once it's painted. This tank's going to be powder coated when I'm done, so I'm just cleaning it up as I go along from dragging it on the table or, whatever would leave a mark in it. That way I don't have to deal with it so much later. I'm using a DeWalt rotary file with a carbide burr on it just to get rid of the burrs where the fuel pump hanger goes in. I must say I really like this DeWalt grinder. A buddy of mine actually let me use it. It's not even mine, but I think I might be getting one. It actually works really well. I installed the fuel pump into the tank, and as you can see, with the spacer that I just welded on, it gives me adequate clearance between the fittings and the top of the tank. Now that I have the positioning figured out where the feed line is, I can begin to place my return line fitting. I'm going to start by drilling a 1/2-inch hole in the tank, then tack weld my 6AN weld bung, and then begin fully welding all the way around. Now that that's done, I can install the fuel pump and fuel cell into the car for a trial fit. I'm going to check the fuel lines to make sure everything's routed the way I want it to be. I gotta keep it away from the exhaust pretty much on the left and right side of the tank, which is why I have the fuel lines going right up the center. I'm very happy with the placement. Now I can cut the fuel lines to the proper length and install the Fragola AN fittings.
Everything has been customized or fabricated to fit this build. We pretty much only used the shell of the car, and we're extremely happy with the progress and craftsmanship so far. Subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on social media at Gentech Performance to stay updated on this build and our other projects. We now also offer dyno tuning, so give us a call if you'd like to schedule an appointment.